Look, it wasn't pretty. The offense had an extremely rough performance against NC State, but the story of the evening was the lockdown defensive performance. The Cardinals escape Raleigh with a 13-10 victory over NC State, moving to 5-0 for the first time in a decade. We'll break down the performance on today's episode reaction of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Well, it is an instant reaction episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. On Friday evening, the Cardinals defeated NC State down in Raleigh 13-10. And what a roller coaster performance it was from the team. For starters, the defense was absolutely brilliant, put together such an impressive performance from the front seven to the secondary. It was truly a dominant performance, but unfortunately, it wasn't an easy victory. The Cardinals offense had by far the worst performance of the season in terms of the first 5 games. So we're going to break down this performance. I think that the first thing to focus on, and this is with any game, is that sometimes it's not pretty. And outside of the Murray State and Boston College games, it hasn't been pretty. They had to come from behind against Georgia Tech by double-digit deficit to defeat the Yellow Jackets. They had to hold off Indiana after having a 21-0 halftime lead. But they came down to Raleigh, 3.5-point favorites. I said all week long that I view this as a trap game, and really not even all week. Like, it feels like it has been over the whole course of the season. The offseason as well, is that this is the game that I've circled. It's a Friday night game down in Raleigh in Carter Finley Stadium. And I just didn't feel good about that, considering that you look at how the Cardinals have played in Raleigh. A lot of these performances haven't been great, even if they have been victories. 2019, they got a victory. 2015, they got a victory. But 2017, when Lamar went to Raleigh, it was a rough performance. You look at 2021, very rough performance as well. And now 2023, it was yet another rough performance. But like in 2019, Louisville was able to finish the game strong. That has been a welcomed trend over getting close to the first half of the season, is that 3 of the Cardinals' 5 wins on the year have been ones that they've had to finish strong. They've had to, fight some adversity and finish strong. Louisville, for the second time this season, witnessed a double-digit deficit, 10-0 at halftime. And they ended up, making some big-time plays. Shout out to Cam Kelly, by the way. I mean, you really could look at this whole defense in particular, but Cam Kelly forced 2 critical turnovers in the second half of this game in that third quarter that really shifted the momentum of this game. It was absolutely looking like, okay, NC State can make this a 17-0 game. Cam Kelly gets that interception, but you also have to credit the Cardinals pass rusher for putting pressure on Brennan Armstrong. So, like I said, it's hard to look at one star of the game. The star of the game is the whole defensive side of the football. It was fantastic. They allowed 10 points, but NC State had short field on both of those drives. Or maybe not short field on that first touchdown drive, but they were definitely past their 30-yard line. On the evening, NC State had less than 10 first downs. They were 3 of 15 on third down. Both teams were heavily penalized during this contest. Both teams turned the ball over 3 times, and it was a game to forget for the offensive side of the football for both teams. But in terms of looking at this game as a whole, I spoke a lot to say this. even though the performance was not the greatest on the offensive side of the ball, it wasn't consistent. A win is a win. Al Davis said it best. Just win, baby, win. Look, the team is 5-0 for the first time since 2013. The last time Teddy Bridgewater put a jersey on at the University of Louisville, or the last season, I should say. The lone season in the American Athletic Conference. Since the Cardinals have joined the ACC, they have not gotten to this point. You can make as much criticism as you so desire to do. And we will. We're definitely going to criticize this performance. We're going to be honest. We're going to, do what we need to do to talk about this game in the realistic light. We're not going to be sunshine pumpers, but we're also not going to be absolutely pessimistic, because there's positives and there is negatives. It's still the first half of the season. There's a lot that needs to be worked on. Notre Dame comes to L&N Cardinal Stadium next Saturday evening, and we will definitely talk about that performance. But you look at this game in particular. From a standalone, from a putting it off to the side and looking at it from this game in particular, standing alone in terms of analysis, I think that, it wasn't good enough. Well, technically it was good enough, but the performance itself was uninspiring, to say the very least. Offensively speaking, to be frank, Jack Plummer has to be better. Now, granted, he wasn't the only one that deserved criticism on Friday evening. Louisville was not able to run the football well whatsoever. Shout out to NC State for making those adjustments at the defensive point of attack. The Cardinals ran the ball 29 times for 20 yards. Now, granted, some of that was sack yardage from Jack Plummer, but Jawar Jordan averaged 2 yards a carry. He carried the ball 16 times for 32 yards. So there obviously is something to look forward to there, and talk about the offense and the way that it has. Okay, let me rephrase. I think that when you look at this game, standing alone by itself, the offensive performance is definitely discouraging. That doesn't write off what this team did in the first 4 weeks of the season. Granted, this is the first true road test. Granted, the schedule was a lot easier the first 4 weeks of the season than it will be the next 4 weeks. But, I mean, what is the difference between NC State and Boston College, per se? Too early to tell. I will say this. Tony Gibson is one of the best, if not the best, defensive coordinator in the ACC. Sure, the unit hasn't necessarily performed to the level that it should, but tonight showed you that Gibson is one of the best defensive coordinators when it comes to scheming up a game plan. I think he did what needed to be done at the point of attack on the defensive line to prevent Louisville from doing what it did really well the first 4 weeks of the season. That was running the football. Louisville had a top 5 rushing offense that NC State completely eliminated. I mean, the Cardinals did not run the ball well whatsoever. I don't necessarily know that there was a double-digit run. I'm trying to look at it. Okay, Maurice Turner had a 12-yard run. That was the longest rush of the night for the Louisville Cardinals. There were multiple drops in the first half. Second half, Jack Plummer made some mistakes that you simply cannot make if you want to make sure you win football games. Granted, the team did what it needed to do to end up victorious. That should be the main story coming out of this week. That doesn't mean that there is not stuff that needs to be worked on, because there obviously is. But you can look at this a couple different ways. I think you have to have a combination, style thinking here. I think that the defense, you were looking for the defense to step up. They did. You were looking for the offense to continue to do what they do. They did not. So there's going to be a lot of interesting talk heading into this Notre Dame game, discussing, which Louisville offense are we going to see? More specifically, which Jack Plummer are we going to see as the quarterback of the Cardinals. But we're going to now dive into this performance, starting with the big storyline. That was the Cardinals defense. Absolutely elite all evening long. And we're going to talk about that here shortly after we talk about our friends over at Nutrafol. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated, natural, science-backed ingredients. Their drug-free, patented technology provides consistent, reliable results. Go to Nutrafol.com/men to take their hair health wellness quiz. Take the first step to visibly thicker hair, healthier hair as well. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering listeners $10 off your first month's subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men. That's Nutrafol.com/men while entering the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Nutrafol.com/men with the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. The college football season is almost halfway through. Locked On continues to kick up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, while also going in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find the Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it, so be sure to tune in. We're continuing to break down this performance, now diving a little bit more under the surface to see how Louisville ended up winning 13-10. The main storyline and one of the main things you can point to was this brilliant defensive performance that the team put forth against NC State. Look, I was very skeptical coming into this game because, I felt like this NC State offense was just waiting to break out. Robert Anae has had a ton of success over the past couple of years, not only being the offensive coordinator at Virginia and helping out Brendan Armstrong, but also at Syracuse, and has gashed Louisville's defense time and time again. With that being said, we're with a totally different coaching staff here for Louisville, and that made a ton of difference. Look, Ron English gets a ton of criticism for his scheme, but I felt like Louisville did everything that it needed to do and then some to win this game on Friday evening. It was a completely dominant performance. You look at the statistics for the NC State offense, and look, they definitely were not good. 9 first downs on the game. They were 3 of 15 in terms of third down conversion, 201 total yards. And granted, there were some penalties, but they created 3 big-time turnovers, and that was something that definitely stood out. They sacked Brendan Armstrong twice and recorded 8 tackles for loss. TJ Quinn was electric. He led the Cardinals with 11 total tackles. Ashton Gelati had 6, had the sack and the tackle for loss. Cam Kelly, what an absolute fantastic performance from him. He had the interception in the end zone that prevented NC State from going up by at least 13, potentially 17. He also forced the fumble on Brendan Armstrong that gave the Cardinals the ball, in which Louisville would then ultimately go down and tie the football game. So I think that you look at this performance from the defense, there are multiple players that you look at and you can circle the stat sheet and say, well, this guy showed out, this guy showed out, this guy showed out. The reality of the situation is that this team balled out. From the front 7, the defensive line, the linebackers, to the secondary, the safeties, the cornerbacks. Quincy Riley had the game-winning interception, or I should say the game-sealing interception. Jarvis Brownlee was solid. Jalen Alderman had a couple of big-time hits. Ramon Puryear had a big-time sack. Stephen Herron, fantastic as well. He had 5. So I think that You have to look at this from a collective sense because there's simply too many fantastic individual performances to point out. This was as connected as I've seen this Louisville team. Two aspects that I was focusing on this game in particular was making sure there weren't many missed tackles and not many missed assignments in the secondary. And there were very, very few. I mean, NC State had 2 scoring drives, not many drives in which they moved the ball down the field. Brennan Armstrong struggled once again, 13 of 25, 112 yards, 2 interceptions. He also led the team in rushing, 17 carries for 61 yards. I think that some of this can be contributed to the notion that, look, I mean, this NC State offense, for whatever reason, just is not good at the moment. They have yet to really reach the level in which I thought that they would get before the season. I felt like with a very experienced play caller and Robert Anae, giving him his former college quarterback and Brennan Armstrong, a veteran in this conference that has played against pretty much all of these teams. He's a vet. He's played against Louisville, but for whatever reason, he just doesn't look comfortable. When Louisville was able to get pressure, he was absolutely flustered. And NC State not necessarily able to run the ball as well. I know that there is some lack of experience at the receiver position. I get that. But at the end of the day, I just felt like this was a potential trap game. All of the makings for a trip-up game, especially with Notre Dame coming to town next week. Louisville, for whatever reason, offensively, we'll talk about here in the next segment, just did not play well. But the defense, I felt like from start to finish, outside of a couple different possessions, I mean, there was the possession, the missed field goal that ended up being the NC State touchdown drive, the fake punt. I mean, it was what it was. Louisville probably should have been a little bit more prepared considering where they were on the field. But, I mean, you're just, being very, very critical at this point in time. So I don't necessarily look at this performance and think that there is one glaring hole from this performance. Like, I don't necessarily think that it's one of those situations where you're saying, well, the defense was great, but I don't think that. Saying that a team should pitch a shutout is absolutely unrealistic. So the Cardinals giving up 10 points on the road when your offense was not moving the ball the way they needed to, not putting the points up on the scoreboard. You were tasked with getting a stop in a critical time and time again in the second half, and you rose to the occasion. NC State did not score a single point in the second half. They really, I mean, outside of the one where Armstrong threw the interception in the end zone, there wasn't a ton of threatening plays in the Louisville half of the field. So ultimately, I mean, you can say what you want to say, but you have to give the defense flowers here. I have my skepticisms. Now, granted, you're going up against a very good Notre Dame offense next week, so it's not like this defense is, in my opinion, you're saying, oh, it's one of the best defenses in the country. I think that this was a step in the right direction, and I'm glad that this performance happened because hopefully the Louisville defense can ride that confidence into this upcoming matchup against a top team in Notre Dame. So, now comes the real discussion. That is, what in the world happened to the Louisville offense on Friday evening? We're going to try to dissect that and explain it here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Okay, heading on into the final segment of this instant reaction episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. The Cardinals 13-10 victory over the NC State Wolfpack, 5-0 for the first time since 2013. It's time to have a discussion now about the Louisville offense. For starters, in a blanket term, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good at all. It was a very rough performance. There were some plays to where, there were some solid plays here and there. Chris Bell had a couple of big time plays. Jamari Thrash had some big time plays. Kevin Coleman, Jimmy Callaway, so on and so forth. But overall, it just was not a good offensive performance. Some of that can be, credited to Tony Gibson for scheming up a scheme that brought a ton of pressure to make Jack Plummer uncomfortable, which they did, and to bottle up the run, which they did. They made Louisville one-dimensional, so there was a lot of pressure on the Louisville passing game, and NC State absolutely rushed the quarterback. So for starters, I think with the rushing category, obviously I don't think that this is going to be a trend. I look for Louisville to extend or Louisville to get back on track running the football, potentially next week. But they had to do a better job of creating holes. There just weren't many there on Friday evening against NC State. Jawar Jordan, Maurice Turner did not have a ton of room to run. And then you have the passing game. The passing game was rough. Jack Plummer was 21 of 35, 286 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, lost a fumble as well. I don't think that all the blame is on Jack Plummer. I think if you asked him, he would tell you that he made some mistakes and that he needed to play a better game. I thought that he had some good time moments. He had some solid touch passes. That pass to Jaden Thompson in the back of the end zone was a touchdown catch. And the notion or the fact that it was not after review was kind of mind-boggling. And I guess that it was made up for with the running into the kicker penalty at the very end, running into the punter, I should say, penalty that gave Louisville the ball back and allowed them to drain a little bit more clock, but it didn't necessarily lose the game for NC State. Maybe that is a makeup call, but I thought that Jack Plummer had some plays where he looked solid. He looked like the Jack Plummer of last week, but there was also time where that indecision was there, that hesitancy. He held the ball for quite some time. It resulted in a couple of sacks. NC State sacked Jack Plummer 4 times. Louisville came into this game only allowing 5 sacks in the first 4 games. They absolutely almost crushed their season average. They did crush their season average. I think that some of that was on the offensive line. Shout out to Peyton Wilson, who is a great linebacker, and that NC State defense. You have to give them credit as well, but it felt like a lot of Louisville's offensive woes were self-inflicted. First half, you look at it. Jack Plummer missed Jawar Jordan on the pass on the sideline that would have been a wide open touchdown. There were multiple drops there. Jack Plummer put the ball in the guy's hands, but the player just ended up dropping a pass, and that stalled a couple of drives. They faked the punt, a holding call that didn't even need to be a holding call. I thought it was kind of a tough time to call holding there on that play, but it is what it is. You didn't have to hold there. He was going to get the first down, but there were many opportunities where Louisville just consistently hurt themselves in that first half. There was the fumble in the first half where Louisville was driving. They would get to around the NC State 30-yard line and drives would just stall out. They missed the 53-yard field goal. Second half, the interception at the end of the first half, it was a severely underthrown football for whatever reason. NC State gets the field goal out of it. So you go down 10 going into halftime. Granted, the offense woke up a little bit. They were able to move the ball better, connected and cohesiveness. But, shout out to Jack Plummer on that big touchdown pass to Chris Bell. That was a great pass, great catch as well. And then you move to the fourth quarter where Plummer has the ball first and goal from the 5, throws a very, very tough ball, very tough interception that you just can't make that mistake in that position of the game. Thankfully, it didn't determine the game. But I think that if you had some doubts about Jack Plummer coming into this game, they obviously probably were not getting relieved after this performance. It does beg the question, what version of Jack Plummer are we going to see in the game against Notre Dame coming up? did what needed to do to win the game. But a lot of this could be accredited to the Louisville defense. I'm looking to see how Plummer can bounce back. He had some solid moments, but there were also some moments where not so good. And that's not just on Plummer. That's on the offensive line. That's on the running backs room. That's on the wide receiver room. That's on the quarterback. That's on the tight ends. It was an offensive issue. It's not just on the quarterback. The receivers dropped passes as well. The running backs weren't necessarily getting a ton of yardage. The offensive line wasn't creating a ton of opportunity for the running backs. And just overall, very forgetful offensive performance. But Louisville is 5-0. That's the thing that matters. That's what we're going to continue to emphasize moving forward. So that's going to wrap up this instant reaction episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Be sure to look at this graphic if you're watching this on YouTube, to look at all of the social media platforms. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you here soon.